Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
An alcoholic. I'm only going to talk a short period of time and then I'm going to bail out on you. I have another commitment. When Corey talked to me, he wanted to know why AI is so important. Archives International is going to give us a broader, perhaps different comprehension to the pioneer days of AA. I'm thinking up to around 1955 when we come of age in St. Louis. How Corey got to know me is my first sponsor, OBS, O'Brien S., was sponsored by his sponsor was Dr. Bob. And consequently, I have a tremendous past. My whole AA life is centered around what would be called the Akron recovery. But I've also been very active in the service structure of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I have this duality within me that both loves the structure of AA and that thing called Akron sobriety, or what I want to call Akron sobriety. Phyllis and I, my wife and I, were here in 1965. We met Bill, and I became very good friends with Lois in the 70s and 80s before she passed away. If you were here to hear Mel, you have a sense of this place that allows us to be understanding of each other's foibles and each other's strong points. And God only knows that both Doc and Bill had their foibles and their strong points. It would not have been uncommon to have AAs speaking in a church. In fact, I give sermons. I am studying for priesthood in the Episcopal Church. And in that place, I will give sermons. I do not believe in standing in front of the rood screens. I believe in going to the pulpit to preach, but I'm not preaching today, in a sense. If my sermon would be a sermon right now, if I was going to pontificate right now, and I hope I'm not, because I would be doing that to the choir, if they don't like what we have, they're not going to stay. We were told that by a non-alcoholic, Dr. Sam Shepard, Episcopal priest. He was the one that really come up with a lot of our traditions. If you don't like what we have, you will leave. And they are leaving us in droves. They are not sticking around. The old-time sobriety is gone. on people with 2 or 3 years are leaving or less. That is a very powerful statement to us. If we're not listening, it is our ego that doesn't allow that to penetrate some spiritual place within us. I did not have a relationship with God for 14 years in AA, but that didn't stop me from coming to AA. Because I came here to change my way of thinking, not to quit drinking. The big book is resplendent with this idea that let us help you change your thinking, how you process your own sandbox and somebody else's sandbox, how you process this thing called life. Dr. Bob would not have been overly receptive in AA today. He called all you ladies broads. And he did. But he said that in a time and a place that was acceptable. It's not acceptable today. It's not acceptable to call you anything. In fact, I was in a church group about a month ago, and there was some ladies around the table, and I said, well, you ladies understand. And a lady at the end said, we're not ladies, we're women. And that is true in the 21st century. You'd rather be called women than ladies. And that's okay. You just forgive an old man to use arcane language. But AA's principles don't change. Doc, if he was with us today, would still be sitting at the back of the church, judging every one of us in such a way that he would let Bill know, Bill, I think maybe we got to listen to Dotson and Treat. See, they never used first names. They never did. We all know, I hope, who Dotson is. That's AA number 3. We all know who Treat is. He gave us the service structure. We pattern Chicago politics, but there's no politics in AA. Who are we kidding? This is the stuff that AI has to offer you and I. If you and I don't tell other people about AI, and every 5 years you come and stand in front of us, old gray-haired people that we are, you will lose that sense of AA's real history, that history that demands. In fact, it says on our beloved page, oh, by the way, the book wasn't written by Bill, it was written by everybody. Everybody wrote the big book. In fact, if you want to know who typed out the words, Ruth Hawk typed out the words. But it was Sam Shoemaker, it was Lois, it was Annie, it was T. William, it was everybody. Even good old Hank Parkhurst. Now, what has this got to do with this hour? And by the way, I love this hour because everybody else got a name her but you and I. And I love that. A drunk from a Midwest state and a Hawaiian. We love it. I'm going to leave you with a thought before I bring Herb up here. And by the way, I'm going to leave. It's not because I don't love Herb, it's just I have another commitment. When you go back to your Hamlets, please tell people that they have to support AI on the internet. AI cannot function without some support. But I think we give to the greater community of recovering alcoholics a whole different place than the service structure of alcoholics can do. I will be the first to tell you, I don't want AI inside my service structure of AA. I will make a very strong, bold line between the two. If you have a problem with that, take it up with Phyllis. That's my wife.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
But we need to understand, every 5 years we need to come together and have this idea that somehow, somewhere, some way, we can talk about the Bill Dotson and what Bill Dotson and Earl Tree did for us in the 1950s. We have to understand, was there a relationship between Sister and Bob that excluded Bill? Was there these things? Was there a give and a take? Of course there was. It's human nature. But to lose sight of all of that would be losing sight of the strength that we have today, and our strength today isn't here. People aren't staying like we did. They're not staying like we did because there is division here. There isn't an understanding here that of all the people, their differences aside, they knew their lives, their very breath, demanded that one drunk needs to talk to another drunk at a kitchen table. Not in some coffee shop, but at a kitchen table. Herb, I know you're going to do a far better job than this drunk can do, and I apologize now for walking out on you. We're going to have Herb from Hawaii.
Aloha. It's kind of strange for me to be out in church here. The last time I think that I was in a church as a lector, that must have been about 25 years ago. And here I am now talking to you in a church. This is really my first time doing it. My name is Uncle Herb. I am an alcoholic. And my home group is the Sunday Aloha group over in Honolulu. That is 50 and a half years old now. I came on a program when that group was 8 months old. So I've just celebrated my 50th year on this program. And hopefully that when I get to the old timers, that my name might be pulled up so I can get up and speak to the 50,000 or 80,000 people that are out there. That would be quite something. I'm 88 years old, so I don't think I'll have too many of these international conventions to come to, but that might be an incentive. If they don't call on me tonight, I'll try again, come out for another 5 years. So this is an incentive for me to keep going. Well, as we all have a similar story, yet it's done in a different location, and mine is no different. When I grew up, my dad was killed in an industrial accident when I was only 3 months old. And I was taken to live with my mother's family. My mother is a native Hawaiian. And at that time, in 1917, it was so remote. I don't even know how my father, who came from Iowa, went all the way to Hawaii and went out to the most remotest place in a district called Puna, the area where the volcano is still going on, and located my mother, and then I got to be the result of that combination. My dad, as I say, was killed 3 months after I was born, and she took me to live among her family. So I lived the life of a native Hawaiian. And a native Hawaiian at that time spoke their own language, the Hawaiian language. So English is actually my second language. In fact, it's more than a second, it's a third language. Because in Hawaii, we do have another language there. It's English, but they call it Pidgin English. Now, by Pidgin English, it's the words from all different races. Hawaii consists of races that come from Asia and from all parts of the world. And so we insert a word from each language into our language, and it got to the point that we could understand each other, but the people who came from the mainland couldn't understand us, and that's the way we spoke. I might be speaking a little English, a little different from many of those that you have heard, but that's the way I speak. Well, I got involved in alcohol when I was a teenager, and as I grew up, I got to a point where I ended up moving to another island, and I had no friends on the other island. And eventually I ended up on the street. And as a result of that type of living, being homeless, I spent part of my time in jail, naturally. Now, I just want to mention to you, if you have never gone to jail, jail is one step better than being on a road, on a skid row. A skid row, you have to look for a place to sleep every night. And going to jail, at least you have a place for at least 30 days. And you had a meal, 2 meals a day. The other way, you didn't know when you were going to have the next meal. So I don't look down on those who have gone to jail. I understand that they had to do that to survive. Now, about the reason for us to be here, and that is our alcohol problem. You know, alcohol followed me throughout my life. And I remember one part of it. I was in the army in the Second World War, and I served in Europe. I was in the Battle of the Bulge. I think there might be some of you here that had participated in that combat in Europe. And I was a sergeant. And the reason why I'm telling you this story is that, just remember, there might be something that have come into your life that you don't approve of now. You think it's the worst thing that can ever happen. But I just want to point out to you that it can be the turning point in your life. And this happened to me. I was a sergeant with 4 stripes, and I had my men. I led it through combat, and as we advanced into Germany, we came to a town called Bad Ems. And there someone located a case of cognac. And I knew I had a problem with alcohol, but all during my military time up to that point, I was okay. I didn't have any difficulty. But I remember this one incident when we got hold of the booze and started to drink. And as an alcoholic, when we ran out, I wanted some more. So I got out on a bicycle. I had my buck sergeant along with me, and I headed into this town. This was a strange town. We had just occupied the town for a short while, and then we continued going on in combat. And then I remember walking up the walkway to this house, this German house. I couldn't speak German, but we had a booklet that had a few words. I remember going up and waving at them. And the next thing I knew, I was locked up with German prisoners. When I got up, I found myself with all the German prisoners in the group, and we had a guard over me. And I looked up and I said, where am I? And then I turned around like a real alcoholic. I blamed the Germans for the predicament I was in. I blamed them. It's because of them that I'm in this situation. As a result, I got court-martialed. That was a serious crime. And as a result of my being court-martialed, when the war ended, I had a choice of whether to stay in the service or get out. I knew because of that one strike against me, if I remained in the service, I wouldn't be able to advance pretty high. So I decided to take my discharge. Now, after I got discharged, shortly after that, the Korean War came about. And they were pulling all of the GIs that had joined the reserve. And I did not join the reserve. As a result, I was not called into the Korean War. And then on and on until I got to meet my wife. Now, if that incident hadn't happened, I would have been in a different part of the world, and I wouldn't have met my beautiful wife here. So it goes to show what could have happened. I have a wonderful wife here. In fact, I carry my wife's picture along with me on a cane here. I'm always in contact with my wife. Well, I'll tell you how I met my wife. I went over to my aunt's house, and I walked up, and my cousin introduced her to me. And the first thing I did, I asked her, "Are you married?" And she said, "No, but I'm looking." And I told her that I'm available. And that was it. I courted her for 2 years. And at that time, when I met her, I didn't take one drop of liquor. I courted her for about 2 years. And on my marriage date, I took my first shot again to toast our marriage. And you know what happened after that? That set me off again. And I stayed for about 3.5 years. We got married, and I was advancing, getting worse and worse. Then it came one day when I came home. I knew I wasn't doing right because I was going to work, coming home, and then stop in a bar for a couple of hours before coming home. So this one day I came home, I had a package in my hand, walked in the dining room, I set it down, and I walked into my bedroom. I fell down on my knees and I asked God for help. Say, "God, help me." You know, this might seem strange to you, but, you know, after that incident, I lost the compulsion, the obsession for alcohol. It just left me, never did come back again. Then I told her to call Alcoholics Anonymous. And at that time, AA wasn't the alcoholic wasn't looked.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious. Do you think this is better than Zoom?
Act like they are now. Now we're in a high-class society. Now you can get out, and if you say you're an alcoholic, gee, that's a big deal. But at the time, it's only the winos that used to be on the street that were alcoholic, considered alcoholics. So I called Alcoholics Anonymous, and that person out there asked my wife, "Who are you calling for?" She said, "I'm calling for my husband." And he said, "Get him on the phone." So I got on the phone. He asked me if I was drinking. I said, "No." "You have any booze in the house?" I said, "No." He said, "If you do have any booze, pour it down the drain, and I'll be out there in the afternoon to see you." He came over, talked to me, told me where the meeting was going to be. And I don't know whether they brought a big book, I can't remember now. But on a Sunday morning, my wife and I attended the first meeting. You know, I didn't have any problem. The only problem I had, well, I did have one problem. I remember going for about 3 years. For no apparent reason, I'd get up sometime and I'd just walk back and forth. There was a sort of a strange feeling that came about. And what I did was go to the ocean. You know, Hawaii is surrounded by ocean, so we were living too far away. And I'd get in the water. And I found in my case that the best way from getting away from that feeling was to immerse yourself in the ocean. And that tended to calm me down. And that's how I solved my problem for about 3 years. I got active in a program from the very beginning because we had only about 20 members in Hawaii at that time, in Oahu. And we had about 10 or 15 members that were going in and out like they continue to do. And so we had to get active, and I did get active, and as a result, I'm still on the program. In the meantime, what has happened is that I have I got 2 more children after my child that was with us when I got on the program. And now they're all grown. In fact, one of my daughters was the one that managed to bring us out here, to pay our transportation to come out here. And she's with us because I'm sort of a little problem with my leg. She's felt that she should be with me in this program and see that I'm taken care of. So we're having a wonderful time. I have 12 grandchildren. No, 6 grandchildren, I'm correct, and 1 great-grandchild. And I'm having a wonderful time out here. I say my time is just about over with right now. And I want to thank you very, very much and hope that I might see you at the meeting, the big meeting tonight. And God willing, if my name is selected, then I'll tell you a different story. But that means aloha. I don't know. I have no idea who's the next speaker going to be, but oh, another old timer. Aloha.
Enjoyed your talk.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'm Bob, alcoholic, and it seemed like the old timers all have canes. Well, I'd like to introduce, if I hadn't sobered up, number 1, I probably wouldn't be alive. And number 2, I probably wouldn't have had a family that stuck with me. And I'd like to introduce my family that's here today with me. My son Bob, 19 years in the program. My two daughters, Barbara and Connie. I don't know if you can say they lucked out or not, but they're not in the program. And my good friend Marion in Al-Anon for 19 years. No, excuse me, 26 years. Try it again. 38. You can see why I need the notes. Well, early on in my life, I thought I needed some help with my public speaking. So I joined up with Toastmasters International. And to give my first 5-minute talk, I think I needed a few drinks to get me going. So I gave my talk, and the comments were afterwards, Bob, we think it'd be better if you didn't drink before you made your talks. And that was the end of my Toastmasters. I got up in a huff and I left them. I sure could have used the help in the future years. Well, anyhow, AA came to Minneapolis. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. In 1940, he was brought there by a fellow named Chan Foreman. He used to live in Minneapolis. He's a newspaper man in Chicago. Well, that's how AA was brought to Minneapolis. Well, my dry date is May 17th, 1958. And I belong to Nicollet chapter. Now, I never seen my parents drink any type of alcohol. And they both died when I was in my 20s. However, when I was 16, I went to CMTC camps at Fort Snelling, Minnesota, where I had my first drink. And I sure liked the effects. I remember it was gin. I didn't like the taste, but I certainly liked the effects. I'd found something new. Well, from there I went to a military academy for my high school. And just before graduation, I made a beer run downtown. This is in Owatonna, Minnesota. And I got caught coming back, and I was demoted, and I graduated to private, where I used to be a sergeant. That's the kind of way my life was going to go for the next few years. Had a lot of good times, a lot of fun times. My wife wouldn't agree with the fun times sometimes, but I thought they were fun times. Well, in 1956, well, first off, we were married in 1942. In 1956, I went to see a doctor that had kind of watched over me most of my young life, Dr. Fogelberg in Minnesota. And he suggested to me he's been suspecting for some time that he thought I was an alcoholic, but I finally admitted to him I was having a problem. And he suggested two things. First, he says, Bob, I would suggest you seek out AA. And if you don't want to do that, I'll give you a prescription for antabuse. My wife said, I'll take the prescription. And she did. She had it filled, and I never took any of it. Well, I called AA shortly thereafter, about 6 months. Two fellows came out to see me. Well, Helen's mother, my wife's mother, was living with us, and she was a Mormon. And it was the kind of a tough household for a Mormon to live in that was a very devout Mormon. Anyhow, I met the fellows for lunch the next day, and I ended up asking, you guys think I'm an alcoholic? And he says, Bob, we aren't here to judge whether you're an alcoholic or not. That's your decision. But if you are, you will continue to get worse and continue to go downhill, and the end result will be institutionalized or committed to a psychiatric hospital. Well, I had a drinking buddy, Jimmy. He lived up the street. We drank together a lot. Jimmy was gone, and I called his wife, and she said, I kicked him out. And he was in Chicago. He came back, Minneapolis, and he says, Bob, I'd like to have lunch with you. Well, that was a surprise. So when he had this lunch, he said, I've joined a group called Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of the things we have to do is make restitutions for people that we've gypped. And I gypped you out of some money. And I want to pay you. Boy, that's pretty good. I suppose I took the money, but I hope maybe I didn't. Anyhow, the seed was planted that Jimmy was in AA. I had another buddy. His name was Wally. And we were out to dinner just before Christmas time. And I said to Wally, I think I'm going to join this AA group, and I think you need it too, so let's join together. And Wally says, no, Bob, you need it. I'm not going to join up to AA. And, in January, I made my call to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I talked to a guy that turned out to be my sponsor, one of them. And they suggested hospitalization. Well, they had suggested that before when I first met him. Well, this time I was willing to do that. I went to Gledwin Hills Hospital. It's a psychiatric hospital in Minnesota. And you know, during my sleep time meditation, I wasn't thinking anything of steps 10. But you know, this program might be all right, because I had eaten breakfast for the first time that morning in quite some time. Never could hold it down when I was drinking. So I got the seed planted in Bob that this program is going to be okay. Well, I went to my first meeting at NICLA chapter with my wife. The group I belonged to, the wives were required to attend meetings with their spouses, or if it's the other way around, the husband was to attend meetings with the wife. And this was the offshoot of the group that started in Minneapolis. The thinking behind this chapter was that the spouse needed help as well as the alcoholic. And we started a group where both were required to attend meetings. So that was how NICLA chapter was started, and that's still going today, some close to 57 years later. Okay, something happened in AA. My dry date's in May. We had a convention in town, and we were having the step classes at the time. Ed Webster, the author of the Little Red Book, Stools and Bottles, conducting the step classes. And he said, Bob, you're going to this convention downtown at the hotel. It would be better if you didn't go. You're a pretty shaky guy. And I thought, I got to go. But I really didn't have to go. But I went, and I went home every night, 5-day convention. Last night I told Helen I was going to say goodbye to some of our friends in the hospitality rooms. And, well, before the night was over, I was participating in the drink. And I was pretty drunk, and Helen left me, and I went on a fishing trip with the guys the next day and came back 3 or 4 days later. Well, the AA group had heard that I had a problem from my wife, so I called my sponsor, and he said, well, Bob, I'll call you back. So he called back that day, and he says, well, somebody will call you tomorrow, Bob, to read the book. So I read the book as best I could, and I called the next day again and talked to the guy, and he said, you read the book? I said, yeah, I'm reading the book. Well, somebody call you tomorrow. So this went on for 5 days, and I was getting a little perturbed, to say the least. Why couldn't I come back to this AA group? Well, I didn't know at the time, but I learned afterwards that they're trying to tell me, Bob, AA is the last port of call. If you don't mean business, don't come into AA until you do. Well, it took me a while to figure that out, but that's what they were trying to tell me, and they did a good job, because I've stayed there now for all these 47 years. So now we come up to step classes. I didn't have much problem with the first part of step 1. I knew I had a problem, all right. I didn't even think my life was unmanageable. I was in a psychiatric hospital. Something must have been wrong. Well, the outcome was that, Bob, you go ahead and work the rest of the steps to the best of your ability, and I think as you progress in the program that you come to understand more of what second half of step 2 and 3 are telling you, and just accept them and go on and start your inventory. So I did that. And I finally got my inventory down, and I was a little anxious there because I didn't want to go take the step 5. We took it with the men of the cloth, clergymen. And finally it says, Bob, if you're going to ensure your sobriety, you better get that step 5 down and make an appointment to see this man at the cloth. So I did, and I saw the guy in his study, and he was a minister. And his parting words were, Bob, you're the most self-centered individual I've ever had step 5 with. Now go home and pay some attention to your family's needs and wants instead of your own. Well, I didn't like that too well, but you know the guy was right. So after leaving his study, I parked my car and reviewed 6 and 7. Did I do a thorough job? Anything left undone? And I felt pretty good about Bob. You know, this was the first time for a long, long time that Bob felt very good about Bob. Now I realize that I certainly did have the second half of step 1. I had to believe in a higher power, which I did. And I was willing to turn my life and my will over to the higher power. So I felt pretty good about Bob. And I went home that night and talked to my wife, and we reviewed what I had done that day. So the program has worked for me in all these years. It's given me a quality of life that, oh, I'd be dead by now, that's for sure. My family certainly wouldn't be around. So what's happened now after I've been in AA for a while? Well, we started a teenage group that met in our house. In fact, we got 2 teenagers in our group. They're no longer in our group, but they're still sober. They got over 40 years of sobriety. And we took these 2 teenagers to an AA meeting in Winnipeg. We took a train up there. The guys were 17 and 18, I guess, the 2 of them. There was 4 of them, there's only 2 of them there now. Well, the outcome was that, boy, they had a good time up there, and we all had a good time. And AA was carried to Winnipeg by the Nicollet group when it first started. At another trip I went to the PA, Manitoba. And here again, AA was carried to the PA from Winnipeg. And we had a good friend up there in Jack. And we stayed at his cabin. And we're going to go fishing. And I'm up in the morning, all hot to go fishing. Here comes some AA knocking on the door, and they want to talk to Barry about Alcoholics Anonymous. 8 o'clock comes, and I'm hot to go fishing, and here comes some more guys, and 9 o'clock comes, and here comes some more guys, and 10 o'clock comes, and I'm hot to go fishing out there. 12 o'clock comes, and we still haven't gone fishing. And I was getting a little disturbed, and I made a little comment to the founder of our group, Barry, and he caught me, took me aside, and he says, Bob, one of the most important things you ever learn in your life, and it certainly was true, that you got to put AA first.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one.
If you don't put AA first in your life, there won't be any fishing. There won't be anything else either. Well, I didn't like that at the time, but as I thought about it afterwards, it was true. If I don't put AA first in my life, I don't have to worry about my family being here. I won't be here. I don't know where they'll be, but. So that was a pretty good lesson for me. Stuck with me all these years. And a little bit about the family group. The wife was required to attend. We had a man in our group named Ed Webster, author of the Little Red Book. And his final book was ODAP, our Devilish Alcoholic Personality. And we ended up with Ed on his final presentation in Battle Lake, Minnesota. And the outcome was that these books were now published by Hazelton. I don't think ODAP's any longer in print, but Marion here was involved with the publication of ODAP with her husband. So this is how AA has been for me. It's been a great life, and I'm very appreciative of my sobriety. And I've learned from the program that I got to put AA first. There won't be any family. There won't be anything else. Thank you very much.
It's going to take us just 2 minutes to set up the PowerPoint projector. We're going to do it one. My name is Wally. I'm an alcoholic. By the grace of God, in this simple program, I've not found it necessary to take a drink since October 30th of 1988, and for that I'm truly, truly grateful. And when I say by the grace of God, I mean that, and when I say this simple program, it's the simple program of Alcoholics Anonymous that has saved the lives of millions of people. And I have become an archivist historian for Alcoholics Anonymous because not only has it saved my life, but it's given me the opportunity to carry Dr. Bob's message and the message of the AA pioneers to you this afternoon. You've heard many of the pioneers speak to you during the course of this day. And these are the people that I have been most fortunate to meet and to have been able to work with. In terms of my journey, just very briefly, I had my spiritual awakening in Dr. Bob's living room at 1 year sobriety. If you don't know what a miracle this program truly is, you may not be able to stay sober. Because this program truly is a miracle. This is a miraculous chain of events that led to the foundation and the early development of AA. So what he said was, if I don't know where we came from, I would never know what a miracle this program is. So I flew to Akron, ended up arriving on the very day that they hold one meeting a year at Dr. Bob's house. Has nothing to do with Founders Day. It happens to be on the second or the third Sunday in November, and it's a memorial service for Dr. Bob, who passed away on November 16th, 1950. And so I had just picked a weekend at random, and I ended up in Akron, and I called in a group, and they said not only is there Dr. Bob's house, but they're having a meeting there today. And if you can make a commitment, we'll make a commitment. And I made the commitment right there on the spot. I rented a car, and I drove to where they told me to drive, because she said you'd never be able to find Dr. Bob's house on your own. Sure enough, I followed directions, and I got off at the freeway exit, and there was the Arid Club right at the base of the freeway off-ramp. 2 people were there to meet me. They guided me across town, and here I am standing in the doorway of Dr. Bob's house as this meeting is about to begin. Dr. Bob's house is very modest. It's a relatively small house, and they had taken all the furniture out of the living room. They'd put a table, which is just about the size of the table in front of the room today. There were 8 chairs around the table, and it was a speaker meeting. And the only requirement to speak was you had to have 40 years of sobriety. Only requirement to speak. Now, I know this is a one-day-at-a-time program, but I still am looking forward to that day in November of 2028 when I'm able to speak at Dr. Bob's house. Yes, I've traveled with giants, and some of the giants are right here in the audience today, and I'm just so grateful for the people that took me under their wing and explained the original program to me, because that's what happened at Dr. Bob's house. All the 8 at Dr. Bob's living room, the memorial service for Dr. Bob, had been sponsored by Dr. Bob. Each and every one of them talked about a program that I did not even know existed. They talked about being taken through the steps in 3 to 4 hours. They mentioned something that Bob F. referred to just earlier, the beginners meetings, the beginners classes where you would be given the guidelines on how to take the steps and recover. And recover they did. at a 50 to 75% recovery rate. It was during the 1930s and 1940s that the 12-step movement evolved into one of the most effective and successful programs for the treatment of one of the most insidious and devastating illnesses to plague mankind. During this journey, I will demonstrate the sheer simplicity of the original AA plan of action. And that's what it was, a plan of action that after a few hours of taking the 12 steps, you would be freed from the compulsion to drink, and you would be able to step out in faith into a new way of living without alcohol. This story carries a message of hope for those who are hopeless, help for those who are helpless, and faith for those who were without faith. It's a story that has had millions of happy endings for those willing to seek a solution provided by a power beyond human power. It resulted in a book that has become one of the greatest spiritual books ever written, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a first edition, first printing of the book. And this book has become our textbook for recovery. This book is part of a process that I describe. I do many seminars on the writing of the book and the ancestors of the 12-step movement. That's the reason I'm actually in Toronto this weekend. I did 2 seminars last week on the writing and the writing of the Big Book and AA's early days. And I'm just going to do a very, very brief synopsis of it now. Because from this humble beginning, the 4,650 books that were originally printed in April of 1939, AA has grown to where it is a well-established and very effective organization for treating those who are afflicted with any number of disorders. And I want to take a minute on that in terms of the dramatic growth of this WE program. This is not a self-help program. This is a mutual aid fellowship. I'll discuss that in just a minute. Another one of the misnomers about who we are. But it's all about one person carrying the message to the next. What I learned at the meeting that I attended, where the 8 people were sitting around the table in Dr. Bob's living room, not only were you taken through all 12 steps in 3 to 4 hours, but you were given a 12-step call when you left. You were expected to go out and help the next one because, yes, you had been taken through the process, and yes, you are now ready to take somebody else through the process. It wasn't this 1 step a year, no steps for the first year, you can't sponsor anybody to have a year. I have no idea where these things came from. None of this is part of our original program, and that's why I'm so honored to be able to stand up and carry the original message to you, because for some of you, you may not have ever heard it before. Just like I had never heard the original message until I stood there in the doorway at Dr. Bob's house. It's from these humble beginnings that we've grown, and in April 29th, 1990, this is an article from the Boston Globe, and this is what the Boston Globe staff had to say about us in 1990. The tidal wave success of the 12-step recovery programs has sparked a grassroots spiritual revival across the country, according to theologians, pastoral workers, and clergy involved in the recovery movement. Again, this is 15 years ago. Even then, each week, 200 types of 12-step recovery groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous and others draw 15 million Americans to 500,000 meetings across the nation. The groups are based on the 12 steps of recovery outlined by the founders of AA. So even 15 years ago in 1990, 10% of the adult population of the United States was involved in recovery. And we know that the numbers are much higher today, and we're sure that the numbers are quite similar in Canada. In 1993, M. Scott Peck wrote a sequel to his best-selling book, Along the Road Less Traveled, and in this book, Further Along the Road Less Traveled, the author describes the spiritual journey of growth and discovery, and chapter 8 is titled Addiction, the Sacred Disease. One entire chapter of this book is devoted to us. And this is what M. Scott Peck had to say on page 150. I believe the greatest positive event of the 20th century, occurred in Akron, Ohio on June 10th, 1935, when Bill W. and Dr. Bob started what was later to be known as the first Alcoholics Anonymous group. It was not only the beginning of the recovery movement and the beginning of the integration of science and spirituality at a grassroots level, but also the beginning of the community movement. And it is this community movement that is going to be the salvation not only of alcoholics and addicts, but of all of us. Not just alcoholics and addicts, but all of us. Yes, indeed, the world is a much better place because of Alcoholics Anonymous. And AA offers a highly successful example of the use of ancient spiritual ideas to solve seemingly hopeless modern problems. And as I said, I am a cheerleader for Alcoholics Anonymous. Not only has it saved my life, but I've actually personally witnessed it save tens of thousands of other people's lives as a result of doing the seminars that I do. But we saw it last night. We're going to get a chance to see it again tonight, where 2 or more are gathered together. How about where 60,000 are gathered together? It's an awesome experience. Just want to spend a couple of minutes on the meeting formats from the 1940s that resulted in this 50 to 75% recovery rate. The 3 meeting formats from the 1940s, the original AA program: open speaker meetings, closed discussion meetings, and beginners meetings. Open speaker meetings, 10-10-40 format, 10 minutes of what it was like, 10 minutes of what happened, and 40 minutes of how God and the steps changed your life. And if you didn't have 40 minutes to share how God and the steps had changed your life, you did not speak at an AA meeting. There were no drunkalogs. You talked about the steps. You talked about recovery. You talked about God. Closed discussion meetings to discuss the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, not to discuss my dog died, my car wouldn't start, the stereo broke, and I didn't drink over it. No, you're to discuss the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Part of the process from the 1940s is that it was not just a big book, but it was a big, expensive book. The big book cost the equivalent of $85 US, $100 Canadian today. Many groups had to pass the basket for weeks and months to buy one book. And it was an honor to be the keeper of the record. And what these people did is they came up with various passages within that book that could be read to the rest of the fellowship. Most people received the message of Alcoholics Anonymous verbally, either in the closed discussion meetings or in the beginners meetings. And in the beginners meetings, you took all 12 steps in 4 one-hour sessions. And these 4 one-hour sessions were based on just a few of the passages of the big book, the passages that apply directly to taking the steps. How this worked, it worked just fine. Treatment was 3 to 5 days. You had alcohol removed from your system, either in a sanitarium, a hospital, or what they called a jitter joint. And this is the only part of the process that was labeled treatment. And treatment was actually performed by professionals and semi-professionals, also in conjunction with people from Alcoholics Anonymous that went back into these detoxes, and they were called lay therapists. Again, that was the extent of the professionalism, and that it was a clear line that after you left treatment, you attended the beginners meetings where you took all 12 steps in 4 one-hour sessions. Some people stayed in these meetings for 3 to 6 months. My archival sponsor, Earl H. out of Oklahoma City, was in the beginners meetings for 24 cycles, 2 years before he ever attended a regular meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I asked him, earlier you must have been a slow learner if you had to do this 24 times. He said, Wally, why would I want to attend a regular meeting when I could attend the beginners meetings and watch people recover right before my very eyes? That's why I went through the beginners meetings for 2 years. And up until the month before he died, just a couple months ago, he was still doing beginners meetings in his kitchen. Every Wednesday night, you could be taken through the steps in Oklahoma City in Earl H's kitchen. From there, you went to the 12-step meetings. Again, we're talking about just open speaker meetings and closed discussion meetings. Do you see what's not there? There was no such thing as an open discussion meeting in the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous. The open discussion meetings came from the treatment centers in the 1970s. Has nothing to do with our original program, just something to think about. Because this provided a 50 to 75% recovery rate. 50 to 75%. 50% got it right away, 25% got it after going back through the process, maybe a second or the third time. I'm not even going to comment on the recovery rates today, but this was the original program, and it did produce phenomenal results. At the end of the beginners meetings, you were given a sobriety card. This one actually comes from Windsor, Ontario, very close to here in Toronto. This one had been awarded to Wilfred W. He had taken his last drink on October 22nd. The card was issued on December 10th, 1943, after he had taken all 12 steps. Wilfred became a card-carrying member of Alcoholics Anonymous, as did tens and hundreds of thousands of people in the early days. You had to actually prove that you had taken all 12 steps before you went to many of the closed discussion meetings. Again, closed to alcoholics, but also closed to alcoholics who could prove that they had taken all 12 steps. Again, there was no blind leading the blind. When you were attending those meetings, you had already, the regular meetings, you had already taken the steps. The process is summarized in a magazine article. A lot of people talk about the Liberty and the Saturday Evening Post in terms of being life-changing. In scope, I believe that this is equal to it, though very few people have ever heard of the Look magazine, June 26, 1945. This is a story of Joe, and Joe is a fictitious name, but Joe is an alcoholic, a periodic. He is able to stop drinking for periods of time, but he's been on this downward spiral for 10 years. He makes a phone call to Alcoholics Anonymous. They send out 2 people to 12-Step Joe, and Look magazine sends a photographer to record what happens. Again, these photographs are untouched. This is exactly what happened. Nothing is staged. Look's unposed pictures record the end of an epic binge and his treatment by Alcoholics Anonymous. And here's Joe drinking himself into oblivion one more time. And you can tell just by looking at Joe that he obviously is under the influence. Actually, he's been on a bender for about 5 to 7 days when this photograph is taken. And it's actually the next day that he calls Alcoholics Anonymous, and these 2 people come out to see him. But Joe is still under the influence. I mean, he may have been drinking all night, but this is a photograph the next morning. These people come to carry a message to Joe by telling their story. They don't in any way try to convince Joe that he has a problem. They talk about how they recovered. As a result of that, Joe decides that he would like to go to treatment. He'd like to go to the detox. Well, in the left panel here on this Look magazine expose, Joe decides as he's getting in the car that he's not going to treatment. And so they actually have to manhandle him into the vehicle. And on the right panel here he is arriving at the treatment center. And he still looks like he's under the influence. One eye open, one eye closed. Probably does not have a clue as to where he is. But here he is being put to bed by one of the people that have 12-stepped him, and the panel on the right, here he is being visited the following day. This is one of the first references to the word sponsor. Again, sponsor is not used in the big book at all at the time. It was called sharing partners. There wasn't this vertical relationship where I am your sponsor and I'm going to tell you what to wear and who to see and what meetings to go to, and I'm going to run your life for a while. No, everybody was equal and people were sharing partners. And the word sponsor was designated in this newspaper article, in this magazine article, as the people who paid for you to go through treatment. So next time you see your sponsor, ask him if he's willing to cough up the money to send you on a nice 28-day rehab. Actually, it was 3 to 5 days, and it was at a jitter joint or a sanitarium. But here's Joe, 3 days later, checking out of the sanitarium, which is what they called it then. And the caption here is, physically restored after 3 days, Joe waves goodbye to his nurse. In fresh clothes provided by his sponsors, he looks and feels a new man for the first time. He faces the future with hopes of recovery. So not only did these two people pay for his treatment, they buy him a suit of clothes. Here we see Joe after leaving the sanitarium. He is having lunch with his sponsor, actually the person who has paid for him to go through treatment, so this is his sponsor, and probably doing some either 5th step work or maybe even some 9th step work in terms of how is he going to repay this person. Here's Joe attending the beginners meetings. We know that the beginners meetings were an integral part of recovery in Minnesota at this time, which is where this Look magazine article was photographed. Here's Joe. He gets a job at a coffee roasting plant, and look who stopped by just to make sure that he's working. His 2 sponsors, vested interest. But this says it all. This is the essence of recovery in the 1940s. And the caption reads, "The cycle of AA therapy is complete when Joe returns to the sanitarium to visit another who needs help. He now has a rough grasp of AA principles, knows that helping another alcoholic is a technique for preserving his own sobriety. For the first time in 10 years, he feels he has found a path to a decent life. It's too early to say whether he'll stay on it, but AA's record of 75% recovered is in his favor." When I was doing this in Toronto last Friday, a person from the audience mentioned, "Isn't it amazing that Joe is being trained on how to sponsor?" And I'd never saw the picture in that light before. Not only is Joe returning to the sanitarium, but him and his sponsor returned together. So Joe is being trained not only in taking the steps, he's already done that in the beginners meetings, but now he's being trained on how to be a sponsor. Wow. I did want to take a couple minutes. I am the caretaker for the Dr. Bob and Ann Smith Archives in Akron, Ohio. I was just absolutely honored. It came down in 1999 when Sue Smith Windows, Dr. Bob's daughter, called me. Again, I met Sue at that same event in Dr. Bob's living room at 1 year of sobriety. She was serving coffee in the kitchen. We became very close. She was hospitalized in 1999, and when she was released, she called me and said, "Wally, of the 2 million people in Alcoholics Anonymous, you're the person I trust to find a home for Mom and Dad's stuff." And that's just how she said it. And yes, I did get on an airplane. I did fly to Akron, and I did go up in the attic. And those boxes that were put up there after Dr. Bob died in 1950, I had the chance to open for the first time in 1999. What was in that attic was absolutely phenomenal in terms of the spiritual roots of this program. And much of the spirituality of this program came from Dr. Bob's wife, Ann. She was an English teacher. She was trained, she was a degreed out of Wesley college. She was an English teacher. She wrote extensively. We have hundreds and hundreds of pages of her writings from the attic, and these pages describe much of what is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Some of her writings had been published previously. Ann Smith's Journal by Dick B. This was back in the early 1990s, and what we have is additional material to add to that. Ann was an absolutely remarkable woman. She was the one that attended the Oxford Group meetings in Akron when Frank Bookman came to Akron. It was her and Henrietta Seiberling. This was in January of 1933. They attended the meetings. It was months later before Dr. Bob even went to an Oxford Group meeting. So they are the ones that were the leaders in Akron. Some of the quotes from this period of time, one of them comes from Johnny R. Before one of these meetings in Dr. Bob's home, Ann used to pull out a little book, her spiritual journal, and quote from it. We would discuss it, and we would see what Ann would suggest from our discussion. Ann led every meeting in the summer of 1935. She had the journal, she had the information that was used to take people through the steps so that they could recover. And this is what Bill W. had to say about the Smith residence in the summer of 1935. For the next 3 months, I lived with these two wonderful people. I shall always believe they gave me more than I ever gave them. Every morning there was a devotion. After a long silence in which we awaited inspiration and guidance, Ann would read from the Bible. James was our favorite. Reading from her chair in the corner, she would softly conclude, "Faith without works is dead." Sound familiar? And this is Sue Smith Windows on the right. That's Dr. Bob's daughter. This is actually 1997, again in Dr. Bob's living room. She's joined by my sharing partner, James H. James H. is still alive, 99 years old, 70 years sober. Got sober one day after Bill, 6 months before Dr. Bob. And they also became very good friends. This is what Sue had to say because she was there. She was 17 years old and she was there in the summer of 1935. What happened when Bill moved into 855 Ardmore Avenue and joined Dr. Bob and Ann? Sue was moved up into the attic and Smitty was moved to a fraternity house on campus at the University of Akron. So Sue was there every day when the foundation of Alcoholics Anonymous was established. And this is what Sue has to say about this period of time. Then someone said a prayer, and after that we were supposed to say one ourselves. Then we'd be quiet. Finally someone would share what they got or didn't get. This lasted for at least half an hour and sometimes went on for as long as an hour. We're talking about prayer and meditation. Prayer is talking to God, meditation is listening to God. They practice a quiet time. They practice meditation every morning. And here are some of the quotes from Ann Smith's personal diaries. This is the material that has not been seen before. But see if any of this has to do with recovery as you know it. Surrender is a simple act of will. What do we surrender? Our life. When? At a certain definite moment. How? Oh, God, manage me because I cannot manage myself. If I could have 5 minutes, I think. Okay. And it'll take that long to read some more of the Ann Smith quotations, but I do want to read a few of them. Try to bring a person to a decision to surrender as much of himself as he knows to as much of God as he understands. Whoa. God as we understood him. This is Ann's writing from 1935, 4 years before the big book is published. And again, these are writings that have never been seen in Toronto, Canada before. Stay with this person until he makes a decision and says it aloud. The surrender prayer was said aloud. In terms of the four-step work, why are people so afraid to face their deepest problems? Because they think there is no answer. That's why people won't do a four-step. Anne's telling us in 1935, because they don't see us recover. She's telling us that there is an answer. When they learn that there is one, they will believe it will work for them, and they will be really honest about themselves. In terms of checking the guidance that you receive during morning meditation, test your thoughts. It is possible to receive suggestions from your subconscious mind. Check your thoughts by the four standards. And the four standards were honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. The opposites: dishonesty, resentment, selfishness, and fear. This was Anne's a little checklist she used for taking people through the fourth step. These are the liabilities that she wanted you to discuss: anger, irritability, jealousy, hurt feelings, self-pity, sentimentality. And she said these are all wasted emotions. The daily quiet time, this cannot be emphasized too much. Not a day should be missed. The early morning hours are best. It should be more than one, there may be more than one quiet time needed during the day. What does the big book say? During the day, pause when agitated. Whenever the need arises, one should stop and pray and listen. Anne also gave us the concept of three-way prayer. Prayer and meditation is two-way prayer. Prayer is talking to God, meditation is listening to God. Three-way prayer is hearing the voice of God through others. This is why Anne saw recovery as a triangle, which became part of the original symbol for Alcoholics Anonymous, circle and triangle. I believe that the triangle came to us from Anne. Anne would say, God can speak through you to me, and God can speak through me to you. That recovery is triangular. And she used to talk about in terms of barriers to bridges. The barriers are the things that are blocking us. It's the resentments, the fears, and the harms. In terms of primarily selfishness and dishonesty. That's what's blocking us. That's what we talk about. That's what we agree to make amends for. We convert barriers to bridges. And she used to do it with thumbs and fingers. Barriers to bridges in the presence of God is a triangle. We do have a letter. This came from Smitty. Smitty was the keeper of this letter, Dr. Bob's son. This is from Henrietta Dodson, the wife of Bill Dodson, Bill D, AA number 3. This is what Henrietta Dodson had to say about this period of time. On Friday, June 28, 1935, I met Ann Smith. I met Dr. Bob on Thursday morning in the hospital. When I went to the house on Ardmore Avenue, I met the most thoughtful, understanding person I have ever known. I addressed her as Mrs. Smith, and she said, "Ann, to you, my dear." She wanted to remove all barriers. Bill W. was there at the time. After they talked with me for a while, Ann asked if I would like to go all the way with God. Again, Bill's the student, Ann's the teacher. Ann asked me if I'd like to go all the way with God. I told her I would, and Ann said we should kneel, which we all did. She told me to surrender myself to God and ask God to reveal his plan to me. Ann taught me to have a quiet time in the morning that I might receive strength for the day. She taught me to surrender my husband to God and not to try to tell him how to stay sober. This is a quote. This is from her letter. She said that love of God is triangular. It must flow from God through me, through you, and then back to God. In the early part of 1936, Ann organized a women's group For the wives of alcoholics, whereby in her loving way she tried to teach us patience, love, and unselfishness. She tried to teach us patience, love, and unselfishness. When I met and talked to this intelligent, deeply spiritual woman, I was completely sold on the AA program. Yes, Anne was truly a spiritual giant and one of our unsung heroes. And I'm honored to be able to carry part of her story to you this afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Wally. That was great. That concludes our program today, but before we go, there's something I'd like to do very much. Corey, will you come up here? Those of you who don't know, this is Corey Franks from Minnesota. And we, all of us who've enjoyed the speakers we heard today, owe a debt of gratitude to Corey. Corey has been one of the folks instrumental in predominantly keeping Archives International alive between Minneapolis and now so that we can all be here. So I'd like us to give a hand to Corey for all his hard work.
Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.